Well, when I was a very young child, my parents' record collection and my sister's record collection were the things that influenced me. And basically, I think the first real music that I heard that I enjoyed was Charlie Christian, playing with Benny Goodman. And they had old Hank Thompson records, Western Swing records, Gene Krupa. It was just all the top things, you know, the 30s and 40s were playing in my house. And my sister Donna, who's 3 years older than I, would bring home the hits of the mid-50s. So, and Les Paul, I was completely enthralled with. I suppose his first record came out in '51, I guess. And I had an aunt and uncle that had those records, so I would listen to those.
How old were you then?
In '51, 6.
That's pretty sophisticated, isn't it?
Well, I was absolutely mesmerized by that sound. I mean, I actually had an experience where people might think I'm crazy or something, but I can remember being a young enough child that I was in a crib on a sunny day and hearing the music of the Angels. No kidding. I heard sounds in my head, and I was, like saying, small enough to still be in a crib. And I always loved music from that time on. So my parents allowed me to take guitar lessons in 1954 when I was 9. And I started to perform professionally in '57, always playing in bands with guys that were at least 3 years older than I was, and better players, so they kind of forced me to the limits, you know, to try to keep up with them.
You'd be 13 years old then? 12 years old?
Yeah, 12, 13.
And this would be, you'd be playing in places like, what, bars?
Teen clubs. No, not bars. I didn't start playing in bars till I was 14. But teen clubs and that sort of thing, just dances,
right.
Whatever kids could do in those days, playing old Buddy Holly songs and Elvis tunes and Little Richard, whatever was popular on the radio in the mid-50s.
Right.
Were the sort of things that we did. So I've got a firm foundation in rhythm and blues and country and rockabilly and rock and roll and jazz. I mean, from year one, I always figured I could play it all. I never could understand why certain players would limit themselves to just one style. Because I was always obsessed with learning everything. Like I think the
How
first,
did you?
I'm sorry.
Go on.
Probably the really first jazz guitar player that I ever tried to emulate was Charlie Bird, because he was on a local TV show in D.C. in '58, I think. And he had an album out on Savoy. I don't even remember the name of it. It was the last record that he ever did where he was playing electric guitar like Charlie Christian. And that's when he started playing the classical guitar and incorporating that into it. But I literally dissected his solo on a tune called Homage to Charlie Christian, which is on Unfinished Business, I believe.
One of your earlier records.
Yeah. And I used to listen to Dave Brubeck, and it's not just guitar players. My influences are keyboard players, horn players, anybody that ever played anything. I hear a lot of different things in my head when I play, and I kind of try to pretend that I'm a one-man band inside. And like when I take solos, I'll think that I'm an organ player for 1 minute, maybe a trombone player. It might not sound that way, but that's what's going through my head. You know, the attitude and the sound that these other instruments have besides guitar.
Did you learn to read music during this time, or was it just purely by playing the records over and over again that you copied these people, or how did you?
Whatever I learned from other people, I learned by ear. I mean, I did have formal training for a couple of years, and I could read a little bit. I think the furthest I ever got reading was the transcription of Arthur Smith's Guitar Boogie. And I had a friend named Gene Newport at that time that was in a band called the Thunderbirds, and he looked like Gene Vincent. Boy, those guys were good. At least I thought they were. And Gene came over to where I was having a lesson one day, and he asked my instructor, a guy named Abe Rosenblum, who was kind of a Jewish gypsy violinist, who really couldn't play that well, but he sure could teach.
Right.
You know, he insisted that I use my little finger, like a lot of guys start off the wrong way. When you form bad habits in the beginning, they're really hard to change later on.
Yeah.
So I'm very thankful to him. for that, but Gene Newport said, all right, Abe, let me take this kid upstairs and show him something. So he took me upstairs and he showed me this. I'll try that again without the mistake. He showed me this. Without the mistake. So that was the first thing I ever learned to play by ear. And shortly thereafter, when I realized I could play by ear, I quit taking lessons.
Mhm.
And except for one time in 1960 when I took classical lessons from Sophocles Pappas at the guitar shop in Washington, D.C., who was a student of Segovia, I never took any more lessons. So by getting involved in that, they insisted that you play open hand, couldn't use a flat pick. But I did learn some of the basic classical techniques and incorporated into the way that I play, which is holding a flat pick between my thumb and first finger and using all the rest of my fingers. The various digits are trained to do different things.
Right.
And it's been a very long, grueling process.
Oh, I'm sure, but I mean, one of the beauties of watching you play is seeing every finger put to good use.
I make a lot of mistakes.
It's not something that you get to see very often these days. So,
Well, I make it pretty hard on myself because I always imagine more things than I'm capable of physically doing, and sometimes I paint myself into musical corners with no means of escape.
what
And
happens
that's when the
next?
clams come out. A fresh bucket of clams.
Yeah.